The topic for my webinar today is how construction companies are bridging the communication gap with external collaborators. I spent a lot of time helping people understand how they can use Priority Matrix internally as a team collaboration system, which absolutely is a huge use case for construction companies and, in fact, a lot of our users in general. But what we're going to look at today is how we can bridge that communication gap out to our external collaborators as well. So within the construction industry, there's a lot of moving parts. Everybody's playing a huge role in the project, and most people are in touch with the external collaborators. So who would those collaborators be? That can likely include architects, engineers, contractors, subcontractors, suppliers, and even stakeholders. So throughout the entire process of these construction projects, there's a lot of collaboration happening with these key players outside of the company. And with these external communication gaps, without priority matrix, there can be a lot of challenges that come up. And so what are those communication gaps that I typically see when I'm working with companies like this? Number one, I see a lot of people attempting to email contractors and stakeholders. So what that can often look like is a lot of emails going out and not a lot of updates coming back to the construction company who's waiting to hear from all of these external collaborators. What that often means is a lack of real-time updates, unfortunately. And with the lack of real-time updates, it can honestly really delay the project. There's misunderstood responsibilities, just a general lack of communication. And as we all know, the last thing we want to do is slow down a project if it's happening internally. But when it comes to kind of going step by step with external collaborators and stakeholders, it becomes that much more critical to actually have a accurate way to communicate and work with those external collaborators so we're all on the same page, making sure this project can be finished on time without too many road bumps coming up. So with that being said, how are construction companies actually succeeding with Priority Matrix? Priority Matrix makes communication easy on the go. On my next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the mobile application, but this is a huge use case for people in the actual construction company and those external collaborators who are oftentimes driving from job site to job site, scoping things out, and they do need to stay connected with the companies that they're working with. So having that available on the mobile app is critical. With Priority Matrix, you are able to collaborate without any barriers when it comes to working with people outside of the organization. I've been faced time and time again with people in the construction industry who come to me and they're super frustrated because they may have a really great system set up to work internally, but when it comes to sharing information outside of the company, they say, "Hey, Erica, we actually just can't collaborate at all with those external people with the system that we're using. Priority Matrix is not going to provide that problem for you." Lastly, and we're going to get into this a little bit more in my presentation, but you can actually share information in a read-only view as well. So, sometimes full collaboration is great, while other times that you may just need to say, "Hey, here's the timeline we're working on, look it over, let me know if you have questions," but you don't want them to make any changes. So that's absolutely something we'll look at today, and a big reason why construction companies do tend to succeed with Priority Matrix. So circling back to the use case of the mobile application, Priority Matrix is so heavily used by construction companies, and what that means is there's a lot of people in the field relying on using Priority Matrix. So when you use PM on your mobile app, and a lot of times I see this happening on like a tablet or an iPad, you can upload pictures effortlessly and you can stay connected even if you're not behind your desk all day. For those of you who are rooted into the office environment, we absolutely suggest using Priority Matrix through your team's platform. It doesn't stop there. You're not restricted to only using PM through Office 365. You can also download the standalone desktop app for Mac and Windows, or you can use the web application, which is primarily where I find myself working, either on my desktop or my mobile app. I love going to prioritymatrix.com. It's a great place to get started. So, what are some best practices for construction companies who are using Priority Matrix? Oftentimes, I see these organizations setting up customized templates, which they're going to be sharing with their external stakeholders and collaborators to kind of streamline what happens when they're working outside of the organization. I also see construction companies utilizing the read only option quite a bit, which I will absolutely touch on more in my live presentation. And I see the file sharing and timeline planning also being used very heavily in terms of working with those external collaborators. So as we kind of bridge into the priority matrix demo, I want us all to remember that the idea for today's presentation is to focus on working with those external collaborators. And the reason I bring that up is because using priority matrix with your team, it is such a great use case and so important for us to understand that we do have other resources that I would love to share with you, but just keep in the back of your mind, today we're going to be focusing on sharing information outside of the organization. I remind us of this because it is a very specific use case, and I kind of want to make sure we're all on the same page as we work through the presentation. So right now, what we're looking at is my priority matrix directly through my Microsoft Teams. So in the middle of my screen here, I have a couple of projects selected for the presentation. And again, these projects could be ones that we're working on in kind of a mixed bag, whether it's just with my team or with my team and external collaborators, or maybe it's projects I've set up specifically just to share with stakeholders like we have down here. So the first example that I want to show you for how construction companies are effectively working with external collaborators is by adding priority matrix tabs to these channels that those external collabs may be involved in. So in this case, I've added an example, and I'm actually going to switch to a different project first, which is the example of sharing a priority matrix project with external collaborators in a fully collaborative space. So again, what we would do here is you would probably work with IT to get those external collaborators involved into your team's environment, added to your channels. And then when you add the priority matrix project, it just gives everybody kind of that additional leg up to say, hey, we are actually super organized on this project, and any real-time updates that need to happen, any communication is happening right through these priority matrix projects. Again, a fully collaborative space through Teams. The other option that I briefly touched on is the read-only idea. So the thought process behind this is you're basically saying, hey, external collaborators and stakeholders, here's the timeline that we're working on. Here's the steps that we typically take, and they will be able to click through it. They can view it in all these different kind of formats as well and get everything they need to know, but there's no modifications being made. So there's definitely a place and time where you most likely would like to utilize the read-only view. So again, everything that we just looked at there is very heavily weighing on the fact that you would have your external collaborators in a Teams environment with you. I definitely understand that that's not the case all the time. So what we've also set up is a way for you to share these projects with people who are not necessarily using Microsoft Teams with you. So it's actually pretty simple to do this. All you would do is just open the project, and then you can share this project in a read-only mode. And this is different than what we just looked at because you would essentially be emailing them this project link, and then they can access it through just a web browser. Maybe it's on their phone or on their computer, but it's a great way to keep people in the loop, say, hey, here's the steps we're taking, here's a timeline we're working on, and you're able to share this with those external collaborators time and time again throughout the process of these projects. Alternatively, if you're looking for more of a collaborative space to work with your external stakeholders, and again, they're not in teams, all you would have to do is essentially add them as a guest user to your Priority Matrix license, and then they can use Priority Matrix where they please. Again, on their mobile app, on the web application, however that would look. It's basically the same as sharing the project through Teams in these channels, but it gives them the availability to use Priority Matrix outside of Teams because we definitely understand that not everybody is integrated into the Teams environment. So those are going to be the most common ways that we see people collaborating with external stakeholders. One more thing that I want to touch on is the idea of using templates. So here's an example of construction bidding. You might think to yourself, yeah, every time we bring on a new project and we're bidding on this, new site that we're working on, we most likely take the same steps every single time. So in order to streamline these processes and standardize them when you're working with stakeholders and you're bidding on a project, just for this example, you can actually save this project as a template. And then what you can do is the next time you have a new project you're bidding on, you can actually add the construction bidding template. So you don't have to recreate those steps. You don't have to rethink the process. It's just going to be there set in stone, easy for you to use every single time. So this presentation is a little bit on the shorter side, simply because we're focusing so heavily on the concept of using Priority Matrix with those external collaborators. If you're interested in learning more about just kind of the basics of Priority Matrix and some of the more structural concepts behind it and how you can use it with your team as well, I'm going to send you all a follow-up email with a link to my webinars where I would definitely suggest kind of browsing through, signing up for an introduction to learn more about, again, the kind of foundational thinking of Priority Matrix and using it with your internal team, not only with those external stakeholders. So with that being said, there's a couple of discussion points which if you are watching this recorded video and you're able to see these questions, I would actually still love to hear your feedback because, life it's all about learning new things. And so I'm always here and open to hear about, common challenges that your team is facing with communication. Maybe we didn't touch on exactly what you were looking for today in this presentation, but if you shoot me a quick email, I would love to hear your thoughts on your common challenges that you're having. I would also love to hear which priority matrix features seem most valuable. And lastly, what additional information would be helpful for your construction company to get up and running with priority matrix. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this webinar for us today. But again, thank you all so much for your time, and I look forward to seeing you on my next presentation.